Zach Charles is a member of the Poetry Postcard Fest, also a member of the board of directors of the Cascadia Poetics Lab, and an avid postcarder. What, 2 years, 3 years?
This will be year 4,
Four.
I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Zach, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. It's really awesome to see so many faces, and as people were saying, some familiar names. Those faces I have not quite attached yet, but it's good to see you all. Grateful to have you all here. This is the first event of its kind for the Poetry Postcard Fest. And we're really excited about it and happy to learn a little bit tonight and try something new. So we're going to be working this event tonight with an organization called Free Time. And I will put some information about that organization in the chat so that if any of you are so inspired and inclined, you can get in touch with them. Katie is a member, Betty as well, um, and continue working with them because the work they do is really phenomenal and important. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the Postcard Fest, which you all know pretty well. A 2-month, 56-day experiment in spontaneous composition and community building. And we're really going to emphasize that, how those two things go together tonight. How that sharing of a little piece of yourself, a little spontaneous piece of yourself with another human being is is a really beautiful way to build community and foundational aspect of it. I'll turn it over now to Katie and Betty, if you guys want to share a little bit about Free Time, and I will post those links in the chat.
I'm happy to start.
Well, you just go ahead, Betty. Go right ahead.
I have prepared remarks. So I'm speaking to you from Bisbee, Arizona, located on the southeast border of Arizona, New Mexico, and Mexico. And Free Time Writers Inside and Out is a program sponsored by the University of Arizona Poetry Center. Its purpose is for volunteers to engage with incarcerated writers from all over the United States, mostly by snail mail, with some connecting through prison email systems. So we build relationships one letter at a time. We write to prisoners who seek engagement and creative writing as a way to survive incarceration, live constructive lives, and maintain self-esteem. We believe sharing literary techniques and providing critiques enhances our own writing. There are about 40 volunteers, and after completing a training session, volunteers connect based on the incarcerated writer's interest, like poetry, fiction, or nonfiction. Each month, we meet in workshop mode and discuss any issues we may be facing in the process. We share incarcerated writers' work. We learn literary techniques to share and about criminal justice reform. I began about 5 years ago and have written to 3 different people over the years. I even recently participated in the parole hearing for one of the people I write to. It was really fascinating. And free time is one of the most meaningful things I've ever done. So for this workshop, in talking with Zach, volunteer your postcard to other free time volunteers and ask them to share what you have written with their incarcerated writing friend. Free time will not be meeting until August. And so I'll plan to get the postcards to volunteers then to address. And Zach is going to collect your postcards and send them to me along with a little description of the Poetry Fest, Postcard Fest, Poetry Postcard Fest. Anyway, so yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And yeah, if I don't have an answer, I'll look it up and put it in the chat.
So where do you find, how do you decide, do you write to people on death row? How do you pick where you pull these people that we're going to be writing to?
Well, PEN America did a book called can't think of the name of it at the moment, but anyway, they listed the free time program, and so we received a lot of those books were widely distributed by PEN America to incarcerated people, and we had a lot of incarcerated writers say, "Gee, I would love to have a partner." They call them mentors. I don't like that word, so I don't use it. But anyway, and so different ways. We now, because we can Zoom, we have the workshop. We have people from all over the country joining us by Zoom on the workshops, and I think the word spreads through them. The word spreads through people that we write to who tell someone, you know, that they're incarcerated with about it. It's just different ways the word spreads. And we don't really select, you know, by where they're located. It's really people who've reached out to us who want to that kind of connection.
This sounds really fascinating. I've wanted to volunteer to do creative writing with incarcerated people for a long time. So okay, so you said there's training. Is it in person or is this all done online?
I'm sure you could do it online.
Okay.
There's a woman named Jillian who's the program coordinator,
Okay.
and I think she's listed in that link that was put in the chat. I can double check, but anyway, Jillian coordinates the process.
Okay.
It's just a one-day training, and then folks, you know, begin to join the workshop. It's not even a one day, it's maybe a couple, I don't even know, maybe a couple of hours. They actually started doing the training after I started, so I kind of jumped in before it was more structured.
It's important to have the training, Betty.
Yes, absolutely.
Why do you think it's important?
Oh, why do I think it's important? Because I think the training, really part of it gets into the mechanics of how the program works in terms of, you know, if folks want to send through the Poetry Center, folks are asked to provide their own envelopes, I'm sorry, their own postage, unless they send through the Poetry Center. There's a lot of those kinds of logistics, but more importantly, just some understanding of, like, I know Jillian talks about boundaries, talks about questions like people are like, well, can I ask what they're incarcerated for? And there's a whole reason that you don't really want to go there. So there's a lot of different kinds of issues. There's a manual that actually goes through the kinds of issues that might come up. So that's why I think the training is really important. I think you jumped in before I did too, Katie, before there was a training. We're the old timers.
Yeah, but that it brings up two different issues. One is that confidentiality, that boundary issue, which is really important, not just in terms of being confidential, you know, about people's names, but it's about looking for the words to. Betty mentioned asking people what they're in for. Now, really, this whole program started, or a main foundation of it, had to do with respecting one another, going deeper than just what somebody did on the worst day in their life. It's really trying to treat people on the inside, which is the way I prefer to do it, rather than using the word prisoner. Or it's they're on the inside and we're on the outside. But I've done a lot of work, not only myself, but I've also done it with students, and even as young as high school. And of course, the first thing they want to ask is, what did you do? Why are you in prison? And it takes a bit of training for us writing people on the inside to really understand. Well, it's a practice for treating people with dignity, regardless of the fact that they did something they most likely wish they hadn't. So that's one part of it, one important issue that I really wanted to put across. And the other is, and Betty, we were talking about this before you came, was that people do want to, writers do want to establish a relationship with one of the person they're writing to. And so there's the question is whether you, I know you said you wanted people to write their poems and send them to you and you would distribute them. What about people in the fest knowing who they're writing to, at least a name, with the idea that there could be a reciprocal response to the fest writer? And I know that would take extra work for you, but I think in a way that's would be important to people that are writing, because we talked about community, and one aspect of community is establishing that relationship with somebody, not just sending it out and saying, oh, I've just sent it to somebody. I know they're on the inside, but I don't know who. And if they write me back, I don't know. So what do you think of that as a possibility?
No, I think it's a good idea. Honestly, Zach reached out to us and we're kind of making this up as we go along, the mechanics of it. So I think more to come, but I think if we can do that, it's a really good idea. The other piece, I was looking at the manual, because like I said, I jumped in before there was a manual. They really encourage a 1-year commitment, because these connections, these engagements are really important to people who are on the inside. So not something you write a couple times and go, oh, I'm too busy, now I'm going to do something else. So I think it's a building process of commitment, and then it's also a building process of relationship. And as Katie said, it really is, I think of it as a community of the volunteers, a community of us working with the incarcerated writers. Anyway, I don't know if you have other questions, but I have some other ideas about maybe ways we can make this connection that we hadn't thought of before. And I'll talk with Zach about it afterwards.
I see that
I'm-
Scott has
I-
raised his hand, and I think it'd be good to get Scott in.
Thanks, Paul. Hi. Yeah, I'm just wondering, I know there are at least a couple of us here from Canada. Are your contacts primarily or exclusively in the US of A, or are they anybody elsewhere, like in Canada, for example?
Well, as far as I know, all the incarcerated people are in the United States. But as long as Zoom works, I don't think we limit it to who can be a volunteer.
Right. Cool. Thanks.
And I think it's going, the more we talk about it, I think I would love to see, just because it starts in the Poetry Fest, I would love to see that relationship sustained beyond this. So I think that's another reason why it would be nice to know who you're writing to. I don't know if other people feel the same way, but I think you have to get involved in the experience first to say, hey, I'm putting a lot of energy and commitment to this person, and I'd like to keep it up.
Well,
So,
these are details that are to be worked out. But we have other speakers tonight. Zach, do you think we should get to other folks?
Yeah, I see a couple questions from Christine and Joan, and then after that, let's keep the train rolling.
Very short question. I just am curious, is it just, are the incarcerated people just men? Are there also incarcerated women? And are there also younger people who are in like juvenile detention facilities?
We don't work well. There's some volunteers who, not through free time in terms of juvenile, and definitely men and women. I've worked with men and women.
Yeah, Joan or Joanne?
It's Joanne. Can you hear me?
Joanne, sorry about that.
I just wanted to mention the name Richard Shelton, who is an amazing Arizona poet. He's no longer alive, who spent a lot of his last years teaching writing and poetry in all the prisons in Arizona. And I believe his name is associated with this program.
His one of his proteges is Jillian, who is our coordinator, and she's carried on the program. So there's a very direct line. But I think that's great you mentioned him.
While we're on that subject, let me just say that Katie Sarah Zale is writing a biography of Sam Hamill. Sam Hamill founded Copper Canyon Press over 50 years ago, and he taught for 14 years in prisons in Arizona. In fact, I think it was the major source of his income for a long time, and taught many of those workshops, or traveled many times with Gary Snyder. Sam often talked about his experience in teaching incarcerated people. And one of the things that he loved was that people who were incarcerated took the act of writing poetry a lot more seriously than the average person in the workshop that Sam encountered. And he appreciated the intensity with which they wrote. He felt that people could learn something from poets writing in prison, something about their intensity, something about, if I can remember exactly, what kind of poem would you write if you knew you were going to die tomorrow? And I think it's that kind of duende really that informs Sam's life, that kind of duende that is present with a person who's incarcerated, regardless of what they're there for, because they don't have the same life that people on the outside do. And so I think for that reason, it seems to me that there are lessons for the person writing to the person on the inside. And Sam was also, a poet who learned something in that way. So I put him right up there with the gentleman from Arizona who was just mentioned.
I think that's a great segue into our panel. Community is certainly more than a one-way street, and teaching and learning certainly is as well, as a teacher myself. So I'm going to introduce our four panelists here. Katie Sarah Zale is a member of Free Time, a University of Arizona program for sponsors and mentors of incarcerated writers. As president of the Arizona State Poetry Society, she positioned a liaison between ASPS and Free Time to increase the availability of mentees for writers on the inside. As a college English instructor, she has developed programs for her students to write incarcerated writers and exchange poetry prompts. She introduces her mentees to one another through their creative work, thereby building community within the prison system. Katie has published 4 collections of poetry and is co-editor of 3 anthologies, including Strange Fruit, Poems on the Death Penalty, written to support the end of the death penalty in Washington State. She's working on a biography of Poets Against the War founder and Copper Canyon Press co-founder, Sam Hamill. Judy Kleinberg, is an artist, poet, and freelance, An artist, poet, and freelance writer. Judy Kleinberg lives in Bellingham, Washington, has been a devoted poetry postcarder since 2011. Her daily WordPress site, The Poetry Department, covers all things poetry in the upper left-hand corner of the USA, and her poetry, including more than 800 of her found poems, has been published worldwide in books, chapbooks, journals, and anthologies. We saw a great example of those just a moment ago from Paul. Matt Treese is a poet, artist, teacher, and astrologer. He serves on the board and teaches poetics through the Cascadia Poetics Lab. Co-curates the March and Shift reading series, serves as the poetry editor for the Celestial Arts Education Library Institute Review, and is founder of In Transit, an astrology, poetry, and spiritual ecology consulting and research company. He lives in the Salish Sea region of Cascadia on the land of the Duwamish people with his partner Zan and her mom Catherine, his son Harvey, and their dogs Hoopla and Azra. And finally, we have Paul Nelson, son of a labor activist father and Cuban immigrant mother, born on Chicago's West Side in 1961. He's lived in King County since 1988. He founded the Cascadia Poetics Lab, formerly Seattle Poetics Lab or SPLAB, and the Cascadia Poetry Festival, and co-founded the Poetry Postcard Fest. Since 1993, CPL has produced hundreds of poetry events and 700 hours of interview programming with legendary poets and whole systems activists, including Allen Ginsberg, Michael McClure, Joanne Kiger, Robin Blazer, Diane DePrima, Daphne Marlett, Nate Mackey, George Bowery, Barry McKinnon, Jose Kozer, Brenda Hillman, and many others. And I'd like to start, before we get into the questioning, with a couple short excerpts from a poet I just learned about. I'm a Spanish teacher, and I just had the privilege to travel with some of my students to Costa Rica. I learned about this guy, Jorge de Bravo. See him there. Turrialban poet from Turrialba, Costa Rica, the area that we were staying in for the most part, sort of central jungly area. And this is from his book, Los Despiertos Guerrilleros, the Awake Guerrillas. I'll read in Spanish first and then in English. El mundo camina hacia una era de amor y de fraternidad. La miseria desaparecerá de la faz de la tierra. La igualdad de derechos y de oportunidades se impondrá a pesar de los que luchan por esclavizarlo. Venid a la lucha, hermanos, que lo que ha de ser será más pronto si nuestros brazos empujan los molinos de la historia. La canción del poeta debe alumbrar el camino de los pueblos, y ay de lo que hagan canción de sombra, porque los pueblos lo arrojarán al despeñadero de los olvidados. The world walks towards an era of love and fraternity. Misery will disappear from the face of the earth. Equality of rights and opportunities will impose themselves despite those who fight to enslave them. Come to the fight, my siblings. What has to be will be more quickly if our arms push the mills of history. The song of the poet should illuminate the path of the people. And oi to those poets who make the song of shadow, because the people will fling them over the cliffs of oblivion. One more short piece from Jorge. Soy poeta de un tiempo terrible y maravilloso. La humanidad va desbocada hacia el futuro. Hay un camino que desemboca en la muerte y un camino que desemboca en la fraternidad. Hay del poeta que empuje a los hombres hacia el camino de la muerte, y hay del que se siente en una piedra a cantar odas abstractas mientras los hombres van hacia la muerte. La poesía es una arma. Yo estoy dispuesto a usarla en la lucha por la justicia, la fraternidad y el amor. I am a poet of a terrible and marvelous time. Humanity goes wildly into the future. There's one path that disembarks in death and one path that disembarks in fraternity. Oi, the poet that pushes people toward the path of death. And oi, the poet that feels in a stone to sing abstract odes while men go to their deaths. Poetry is a weapon. I am disposed to use it in the fight for justice, fraternity, and love. And I just came across that and felt it was the right way to open this, for justice, fraternity, and love. So with that in mind, I want to start on the poetry side of things. Judy, maybe if you would be okay with starting this, what is or does spontaneous composition mean to you?
Good question. I think for me, spontaneous composition really has to do with what I do as found poetry, where I am looking in magazines for places where words stack up accidentally to create new language, new syntax. I'm taking words totally out of context. And what I find is that the words that I'm discovering show me what I'm thinking about. I don't go into it looking for, I'm going to find a poem or write a poem about the political situation, or I'm going to write a poem about spring or the moon or love or whatever it is. But as I start looking for words, those are the phrases that rise to the surface. And they don't necessarily all hang together as a single poem all at once. But to me, that's sort of the wonder of the process, is that the the words are showing me what I should be focusing on.
Yeah, that acceptance of guidance from the seemingly accidental. Um, I have some questions that relate to that as we keep going.
Okay.
Paul, do you mind chiming in? What is or does spontaneous composition mean to you?
When I started interviewing poets in about 1994, Allen Ginsberg was one of the first that I interviewed. And he talked about first thought, best thought, which is a soundbite I've used in workshops for a long time. And it made a lot of sense to me. I likened it in the moment to meditation, and that there's a lot of truth to that. And then I interviewed Michael McClure about 14 or 15 months after interviewing Ginsberg, and he talked about Charles Olson's project, or his essay, Projective Verse. And it made a lot of sense to me. In fact, when I was a newscaster for the radio station that I worked for right before I started doing the syndicated public affairs programs, I used to create a script in which I would capitalize certain words or to emphasize them. It was a cue for me to be able to read them in a certain way during newscasts. And I realized later that that has a lot in common with projective verse, which Charles Olson said the typewriter for the first time allows the poet the kind of tool that the musician has had with the music scored on a page. So space equals breath on a page, according to projective verse and Gary Snyder and others who practice it. So that was the beginnings of me getting a sense of the spontaneous, which I immediately resonated with. And then as I got more into my own individuation, I found the Subud community. And when somebody is initiated into the Subud spiritual community, the shorthand is they say that they are opened. Allen Ginsberg talked about open form. Charles Olson mentions that several times in projective verse. And I've really seen that that continuum of open versus closed, not just as a way to write a poem, because if you already know what you're going to say, how is anyone going to get any discovery out of a poem? And how is it going to be anything deeper than what your opinion is? And everybody has an opinion, and almost all of them are boring. What poetry can do is go beyond opinion. It can go to a place that is able to communicate something beyond the words. And so why settle for less? If you want to get your opinion across, write a letter to the editor. And so that open closed continuum really strikes me as a way to live one's life. There are many Zen parables about the Zen master who was accused of impregnating a young girl in the village, and she accused him unjustly. And when his the parents of that girl came to him and accused him of that, he said, is that so? Which is a very open stance. And when a year later the girl recanted and said, no, it wasn't the Zen master, it was the butcher's son. And they came back after the Zen master had taken care of this baby for a year. And they said, we're so sorry. Is there anything we can do? And he said, is that so? His stance was very open at the beginning, at the end. And I think that's something to strive for, this open stance, not to jump to conclusions, but to see how things happen. Not to jump to a conclusion about one's life saying this is bad or this is good. Many good things can come from things that in the immediate experience of them seem very, very bad. So poetry, spontaneous poetry has led me there. I'd like to also just offer one shout out to a person in the room, and that's Danica Dinmore, who co-founded a thing called the 315 Project, in which a bunch of poets would get together and, well, not get together in person, but they would agree to either wake up or stay up and write every day in August at 3:15 a.m. One of those was Bernadette Mayer, was an incredible experimentalist. And I did the 315 Project for a few years, and then that kind of died out. And I thought, I want to do something that puts poetry in the forefront of people's minds every August. And that's part of how the Poetry Postcard Fest was started. So credit to Danica Dinsmore for that, and credit to Bernadette Mayer and other fine poets for being a part of it.
Without you, we might not all be here tonight. Matt, is there anything you'd like to add on to what spontaneous composition means to you?
Yeah. One of the things I'm always trying to do when I'm writing is to feel into the kind of field around the moment that shapes both how we're thinking and feeling about things, but also like how events are unfolding, how our thoughts are unfolding, kind of like how we might think about the planets influencing our lives and whatnot. And so the spontaneity is an attempt to try and let the words fall into those kind of patterns as they arise.
The dog's eating. Okay, Bernie. Come.
Yeah, sounds a different approach, but a parallel to Judy also finding the words and them letting them guide the way and show the pattern. Katie?
Well, I feel like the new person on the block to this. It sounds like you've got a lot of people that have been doing this a while, and doing this spontaneous poetry kind of scares me. I'm somebody that, at the very least, it takes me months to write a poem, and most likely it's years. But one reason I'm excited about this project is spontaneous poetry is that it may help me in my practice of, that goal of being reflective and not, I don't know about you all, but sometimes I just work a poem to the bone, and then I end up throwing out and saying, "Oh my God, where that is so contrived." So, and then I have to sit back and go back to the beginning and really find that spontaneous voice. So maybe this project will help me in that goal. So.
Well, I hope so. It's a great practice, and yeah, sharing with each other from an open place, we tend to grow from that. I want to maybe push back, maybe build off of what you said about writing over months and these longer pieces. Um, and maybe Matt, we can start with you on this one. Um, we're talking spontaneous composition, often that feels like a very small moment. But I know something that and something that you just talked about just now, the planets and sensing that pattern and allowing the words to fall into that. Um, I'm curious about how the bigger scale, right? Whether we're talking the mythic scale, the astrological scale, how does that bigger scale, the scale of writing a poem over months as opposed to a day or an hour, 20 minutes, um, how does that bigger scale funnel into the poem?
Through reiterations, or might think of it as like serial form. So maybe not, if you're, spontaneously composing over the course of, 56 days, you have you have 31 poems, but you also have one poem. They're all kind of these endless revisiting or recasting of different perspectives, feeling in again and again, and over time you get a kind of sense of pattern that's happening.
Awesome. Yeah, back to the patterns. Judy, do you what do you think about this bigger scale coming down to the individual poem?
I guess part of it for me is just allowing the experience to happen to me and not being too intentional, and discovering what's going to come up. And I have some devices that I will use if I'm stuck. And I know I've talked about this before, is one of the things I really like is using the last line of yesterday's poem as the first line of today's poem. And it's one of those things that creates an engine that drives a poem forward. And you don't know where it's going to go, but somehow then you start looking at, these are linked poems and they relate over the course of those 31 days or 56 days or whatever it is, even if they're thematically different. There's something that where you get that echo that runs through them. Maybe there are words that echo and so on. I also, in the bigger scale, I've found that I have discovered themes that seem to insist upon themselves. Very unlikely. A number of years ago, I found myself for the Postcard Fest writing about a scarecrow. And I grew up in Los Angeles. There are not a lot of scarecrows in Los Angeles. But the scarecrow kept coming back and insisting on that there was a story to tell here. And so I just went with it and I let the scarecrow lead me into these stories, and it turned into a chapbook. And which was a wonderful experience. It was just, I could not have sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write 40 poems about a scarecrow. Just wouldn't have happened. But I find that the accountability of writing a poem a day helps me discover the shape of something that's larger than an individual poem, or whether it's linked or a series, of connected poems, or one long poem that's in parts.
Answering you. I was really just focusing on what you said. I mean, that is so new to me. Because I haven't really done this before, but the idea of it, they become linked poems or really one long poem. That makes me feel better because I can see that's how I would work. I do it and I go, and isn't it true we write, who is the person that said we write the same poem over and over again? So I could just see either in the end, I'm going to come up with one poem I really love, or I'm going to come up with a chapbook. So you guys are getting me excited.
That's what we like to hear. That's why we're doing this whole thing. Paul, the mythic, the astrological, how does this huge scale funnel down into the postcard poem?
Well, the mythic is represented in the luminous details of a person's life. So if we hone our perception on what's happening here and now, um, people will have clues about who it is, what kind of person we are, by the kinds of images um, that we write about, the kinds of images that come up in our poems and come up over and over. And if we pay attention long enough, like, there's several people in the room here who've been doing Postcard Fest for years. And it's good that the Postcard Fest comes at a particular time. It comes in the summer. And so it makes mythic things that happen. For instance, I know that Max Roach died during the Postcard Fest, the legendary drummer. I know that Bobby Hutcherson, the legendary jazz vibraphonist, died during the Postcard Fest. I know that the Minnesota Bridge over I-35 collapsed during the Postcard Fest, that the troubles in Ferguson and the death of Michael Brown happened during the Postcard Fest. So it makes those events mythic in a way because I have a sense of what time of year they happen because I responded to them in writing someone a postcard poem. And I think that it teaches us something when we write from a spontaneous stance because, as William Carlos Williams said, I write to figure out what I think. We connect with forces greater than ourselves. That's why Robin Blazer, talking about Jack Spicer's work, called it the practice of outside, which is interesting, this inside-outside dynamic. I also think about Matt Treese, whose new book is called The Outside. It's in a way a response to, there it is, the people of the inside, which is what the Duwamish means in English, translated to the people of the inside. So if you are using poetry as a means for self-discovery, then you learn about your own personal mythology. You begin to see what themes are important to you. And the good news is, if you don't like what that personal myth is, you can change it. So, and I think that's what individuation is about, self-growth is about. Not that poetry should be therapy. I don't think it's that. I think it can be cathartic. I think you can learn from it. I think it can be a positive experience. I wouldn't do it otherwise because I get a great joy in writing something and reading it out loud. And as George Bowering said, I get to be the first reader of the poem. Now, in conventional poetry, people would say, no, 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 you're the author of the poem. You're not the first reader. But George is trying to illustrate that it is the practice of outside. It's you serving as channel for some greater force that's coming through you to kind of help you discover what you need to know in that moment. In Zen, a phrase that Jason Worth likes to use, when you speak from the heart, speak without a prepared script. When you write spontaneously, writing without a sense of where you're going, except for maybe the first line or first image, he uses the phrase or the word dharmic. So that's connected to the Dharma when you can do that. And quite frankly, I find a lot more power to people who speak from their heart when they're speaking in person. There's more power to that than a person who reads a prepared text. I think there's nothing quite as boring as someone presenting at, say, AWP, reading their paper, and that's not what we're capable of as humans. And we all expect the best from each other. So there's a lot of reasons that point towards the mythic, especially using the spontaneous method. And I've learned that in my own life. That's very, very true. And it's one of the reasons I treasure the Postcard Fest. I learn things from it and also learn things from other people. And it's fun just to go to just go to the mailbox and find stuff besides bills and spam mail and Costco flyers and that kind of thing.
I'm glad that this idea of the inside versus the outside came up, especially given our partnership today and our topic of conversation. And so I want to talk first, before we get to inside, outside, the very physical prison walls that we have, our society has built, our country has built, our countries have built to sort of separate us, and just talk about community, and the inside and the outside of community, and how does writing postcard poems, how does writing poetry in general, sharing these pieces of yourself that you create, how does that help us build community? And I guess I'm also curious, how does the idea of inside and outside relate to building community? Katie, you got it?
You ain't knew who to pick. There's not a lot of community within on the inside. The prison system makes it very difficult, very, very difficult for them. I am writing one person that was, beyond just in a cell, but was in solitary confinement for over 8 years. Now that is beyond my imagining. And yet, she is somebody that continued to write. She has a phenomenal long resume and awards. From Penn to recently as Ms. Magazine. She has she was on This American Life. Imagine how they had to do it with that, because she spoke into her phone in the cell, but it wasn't very readable. And so she had someone that could translate it for it, and the power of that. So anyway, I'm basically saying there isn't much community, and what you as a I'm thinking Betty doesn't like the word mentor, but as a pen pal, which is an ironic word too, with somebody, it means so much to these people, so much that they give a chance. If we look at poetry as not only discovery but healing, that's the gift. That's the gift you're giving these people on the inside. And it was mentioned earlier, I mentioned it in my bio. I just want to add that by having a number of people, I write to about 5 people, and I start mentioning one to the other. And though they can't communicate with one another, they're always asking me, how is Josh doing? What's so-and-so, what's Juanetta doing now? And pretty soon I'm this link, this web connecting people together. Now, does it take a lot of time? It does, but I can't think of anything that's more worthwhile.
I'll also mention one incident last year, and I'll share screen with the email that I sent to Postcard Poets, and that is this. Dear Postcard Poet, Kenna is age 16 and had a brain aneurysm. She needs an additional surgery next week and may not be able to write postcards for a while. However, you are free to write her, and postcards will be read to her in the hospital or wherever she is at the time. Here's an opportunity for you to write a poem that serves as get well card, but goes deeper than that. Quite a writing task. May the force be with you, and if you're so inclined, send good healing energy to Kenna and her family. Sincerely, Paul. Kenna Kangar, 14515 66th Avenue, Northwest Stanwood, Washington, 9292 USA. I asked for permission before I put that out there, and I don't know, I think she got about 40 or 50 postcards. What does that do to a person's life? That's not the only example of that either. There have been people who've lost a loved one right around the postcard fest or just before it. And I secretly told folks to write her. And, you know, that's an incredible lift for a person going through grief. That's what community does. You know, it transcends political differences, it transcends all differences, and it gets us to the human level where we can have compassion in a moment and, you know, take 10 minutes to write a postcard poem to someone who's hurting, someone who's just lost a loved one, or whatever the case may be. So the Postcard Fest is a community, and it's wonderful to be able to meet someone with whom you've exchanged postcards for years. Tim Mateer, an example of that. Here's a guy who sends out, besides the Postcard Fest, sends out maybe a couple hundred postcards every year. And last year we finally had the chance to meet. He's been taking my workshops too, so I've gotten to know him. I got to know him through the online workshops as in Life as Rehearsal for the Poem. So yeah, to meet someone after corresponding with them is just a beautiful touch. So yes, I feel deeply the sense of community that that this project enables, and I'm grateful for that.
Katie and Paul, you basically answered my last question already. So Matt and Judy, um, why is this important? Why is this work worth the time and effort?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I think we need community now, maybe more than ever. I think that everything that's happening around us is an effort to drive a wedge into trust, connection, all of the things that glue us together as people, as human beings. And we're being encouraged in terrible ways to distrust each other. And I think that doing this work, writing these poems, gives us a chance to connect on a creative level, on a emotional level, even if this is a person we have never seen, we don't know what they could be 180 degrees different in terms of what their concerns are and what their beliefs are and so on. But somehow that doesn't matter, because I think that the atmosphere that's set up within the Poetry Fest is this openness that we've been talking about. And the openness itself creates a sense of community. And I will just say, as I said in my bio, I've been doing this since 2011. And when I see these names coming up year after year after year, I would say 90% of them are people I've never met, but I feel so connected to them. And it's a wonderful feeling.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, our culture right now is about coming across as, having these expressions that are polished and unassailable, and I think one of the things about something like the Postcard Fest is that it reminds us, or it can remind us, that our expressions, our thoughts, and all these things are a part of a practice, something that we show up to again and again and again, and that we don't have to, be perfect. That we have another chance tomorrow. We have enough. It's about showing up and doing it again and again, and in that showing up, there's an opening there for community, because when you present yourself as unassailable, then you're also unapproachable. And I think that having a way to signal to yourself first, and then also to whoever you're sending the postcard to, that, hey, this is, write me, write back, say something. It's been great to see the online communities spring up around this and people wanting to get to know each other. And I think that's because, it's not in that kind of polished, branded messaging. It's not so tightly controlled.
Absolutely. And I think that we're talking about big things. We're talking about the mythic and we're talking about big, big ideas. But I think we tend to be pretty judgy about ourselves and what we put out. And sometimes I find that if I just write unedited first draft on top of the poem that I'm sending out, or at the bottom or something like that, it helps me to just say, okay, this is not for publication. This is a draft. And that makes it a lot easier to just say, I'm opening myself up to you and to this community.
Judy, Katie, Matt, Paul, thank you all so very much. I am so grateful to hear your wisdom on these things, this poetry writing, this community building, breaking down in the invisible barriers we put between ourselves and, hopefully also eventually some of the physical ones. Those start with changing our imagination. That's what art and poetry can do. So thank you for your time and your wisdom this evening. Linda, you got a little card there. Transcend differences. Let's do that. We're gonna move now to do a little community writing. I have should we take a 2-minute bio break? I see some nods. So let's take a 2-minute bio break. Grab your writing utensils. We'll be back here at 7:05 or 6.
I also had put in the chat, I wanted you to write the name of the Costa Rican poet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. And everybody. Jorge de Bravo is the Costa Rican poet. I'm going to read a poem from him in just a second. We'll give it one more minute to see some faces pop back up, and then we'll get going.
Thanks for making it, Betty, and you were so awesomely prepared.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Betty.
Yeah, nice.
But then I
present-
felt badly when Paul talked about
Oh,
people who speak
stop.
spontaneously.
It didn't sound like you were talking from a prepared script. It sounded very personable.
Thanks.
No, and we're grateful for the work that you do, and it's important. And you don't know this community, so to make sure you get your words right, I understand that completely. I think that the Dharmic is something that we strive for, and maybe your 10th appearance here, you'll be able to do that. So thank you for understanding. Thank you for being here.
Why don't we get going with the community writing? Thank you all for being here, for listening to Betty and Katie talk about free time, and Paul and Matt and Judy and Katie. Yes, Mary, the recording will be available to you all. Fret not. I have a poem from Jorge de Bravo to share to start us off, and I was thinking in terms of prompts, in terms of community writing, if anybody has read anything, a news article, a poem, if somebody overheard somebody passing by on the street say something that you thought was funny or profound or a little strange. I just want to invite you to put that in the chat right now as we're starting to write, so everybody can kind of create this sort of group material that we can work from. Jorge de Bravo wrote this in 1967, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 1967. He died pretty young. Fortunately, he was 29. He was hit by a drunk driver. This poem is called Fraternidad, which translates literally to brotherhood, but I'm going to take some liberty and call it shared humanity. Cada uno de vosotros extiende, sin saberlo, su mano y me sostiene el corazón. Yo no podría vivir sin esas manos vagas, invisibles, que arden tiernamente entre mis músculos, como si sanos, densos, vivos pueblos me habitarán. Los hombres somos aguas que vagamos de un ser a otro, hambrientos de crecer y de crecer, de humedecernos, de un eterno estreno de otras manos. Cada día soy otro, algo menos yo mismo y algo más ese hueso que madura en el cuerpo del vecino. Each one of you extends, without knowing it, your hand and sustain my heart. I could not live without these hands, vague, invisible, that burn tenderly between my muscles, as if healthy, dense, lively towns inhabited me. Humans are waters that wander from one being to another, hungry to grow and to grow, to dampen ourselves in an eternal debut of other hands. Every day I'm another, something less, I myself, and something more, this bone that ripens in the body of my neighbor. So we've got lots of stuff rolling in. From Danica, headline from Science Alert: we emit a visible light that vanishes when we die. From a study by Canadian researchers. From Ali, Oakland's bird is a night heron, but I don't see them often. However, today on my walk to the library, I saw one fly by, and another person, a father pushing a stroller, saw it too, and we both stopped and noticed and watched the night heron fly just above eye level. That's awesome. Herons are fantastic birds. Judy shared from Gaston Bachelard, The Poetics of Space. An empty drawer is unimaginable. So go ahead, get your postcard out, a pen, and I would like to invite everybody to feel free to talk a little bit, well, certainly use this time to write, but we're in community. So if you have an idea, eureka moment, shout it out. And so folks know, to get these postcards to where they're going, what we're going to do is don't address it, put it in an envelope, and you will send that envelope to the address I just posted to Betty, P.O. Box 7, Bisbee, Arizona, and thanks to her and her hard work and a couple other folks at free time, they will sort through the postcards and forward them on to their final destination. And then, yes, I will repost the links to free time. And so you all can have that information right here.
I did it before you said that, Zach.
Oh, thank you. It's already there. Betty just put the link.
So Zach, just to verify, we can participate this way without going through the training?
Yes,
Sort of a one-time basis?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And then if you would like to participate more, definitely highly encourage you all to reach out and do the training and keep going. Linda, I think on this go round, we probably won't be facilitating the individual response. But if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out to Free Time and keep writing that way, and then you'll be able to know exactly who you're writing to, and they will be able to know who you are, and you'll be able to develop that relationship.
The Poetry Postcard Fest registration is going till at least the 4th of July. Poetrypostcardfest.org is the website. You'll find lots of information there about past fests, about experiences, about how to, and what have you. There will be a workshop on June 11 designed to give people some ideas for how to navigate the Postcard Fest and answer questions about it. There's also going to be an open house coming up. Details are on the website, poetrypostcardfest.org. I'm really grateful to the speakers tonight, and especially Betty for this program, which in this time of, I'll just, don't get me started. I will just say in this time of political and cultural chaos, where it is said that compassion is a weak thing, I will say that it shows the strength of human beings who are interested in the plight of people less fortunate than themselves, and lets us understand that we, coming from a place of gratitude for what we have, is a very critical thing for our own health and well-being. And anyone who wants to get involved in writing to people who are on the inside, I think that that's one of the highest and best uses of one's writing skill. And I encourage you 100% to follow up that urge to take the workshop and to address it respectfully. I will just say that my experiences with Katie introducing us to Juanetta Harris has really opened up some realms for me, for which I'm very, very grateful. So I'm grateful for all who attended and grateful for Zach, who did a fantastic job in guiding us and helping this thing go.
Thank you, everyone. We got a couple minutes left. Keep writing. We'll wrap this up at 7:30. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here and for building this community.
Thanks for reaching out to us. I'm really excited to see where this goes. So
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Betty and Katie, for being excited and energetic collaborators. We'll work out the wrinkles for sure, and this is going to be fruitful.
well, I think I was just, the wrinkle to me was Katie's idea of knowing who people write to, but I really like your idea, Zach, of if, let's send these, let's get them out, make that connection. And then if people are interested in going beyond that, that's kind of what you've had an introduction to. I really thought that was a great response.
Thanks. Yeah.
So can I just do a check, now that everyone here has heard what they may be getting into? Can I just have a hands up about who thinks they will be interested in doing it?
He's
Come
4,
on.
5, 6, 7.5.
Okay, super.
By it being free time or the cards, Katie?
Free time. I think everyone here is invested in doing that. The poetry postcard fest. Am I right? Yeah.
Do we sign our name, our first name, or more on these postcards to the insiders?
I think a first name would be nice. Yeah.
Just a first name is fine. Yeah. I suppose, what do you think, Paul? People that are interested to, because we'll need that contact, either they contact Betty or you want to give your contact information, Betty? Do we have it there?
I think you
Beside
put
you.
in, I think you put in Jillian, and I'm gonna give Jillian a heads up. But yeah, I can put my contact info in. But really, if you take the next step, you'll get to know Jillian, who, as I said, is a protege of Richard Shelton, and she's just wonderful. She's great to work with.
I was just thinking in terms of this project, she might appreciate it if, if questions and names of who's interested would go to you rather than her.
Will do. So I just sent all my contact info in the chat if anybody wants to use that way to reach out to me.
Thank you, Betty. See you in the mail, Judy. In the mail.